Hey everyone, welcome to another live recording of Trump's Trials and Tribulations, New York Trial Dispatch Edition. Today is May 16th, 2024, the third day of Michael Cohen's testimony. I'm Roger Parloff, a senior editor at Lawfare, and I'm here with courts correspondent and legal fellow Anna Bauer, managing editor Tyler McBrien, and editor-in-chief Benjamin Wittes. Ben, you were in the courtroom this morning. Can you set the scene for us?
Well, Trump came in with an unusually large delegation. There were a whole lot of congressmen, Matt Gaetz, and I don't even know who else. It was a large group of people. It was a kind of show of MAGA force. And uh, you know, I guess they perceive that we are nearing the end here. And I think there was an element, honestly, of wanting to intimidate Michael Cohen, just showing him all the people who he's made enemies of. And so that was, that was the atmospherics of it. A whole lot of people glaring at him and snickering whenever Mr. Blanche would land a punch. Michael Cohen was a bit tired, I think, after he was a little bit less combative than in the previous interactions. He was, I wouldn't say sort of beaten down, but he's clearly had enough and wants to be done. Um, and um, and of course, Todd Blanche, I think, was very aware of not having dealt the knockout blow the other day, and so was sort of encircling for the kill mode. I think that's the best I can do atmospherically.
Just to add one one funny moment, I think, with regard to Trump's delegation behind him. There was a moment that I think we'll talk about later in which Blanche was talking about congressional testimony to Cohen, and he said, "You know how congressmen are; they drone on and on, much like me, but I don't drone on as long as they do." And it's just funny for him to say that with just about half the Freedom Caucus sitting behind him.
So, Tyler, what were the main themes of the cross today?
Well, I think it started out a bit slow and choppy. We started the day actually with a long sidebar, and then after Blanche resumed rather the cross. It's sort of meandering. It was hard to pick apart what the big themes were. There were a lot of questions about. I think we started out today with a lot of questions about the past times in which Cohen lied to different federal judges under oaths. There was a lot of talk about the oath that Cohen lied under, the very same oath that he was under while giving his testimony today. Blanche seemed to argue that even when Cohen was coming clean about lying, he was lying in certain times. So he's lying in all these times. There were also these themes of we got a sense of a little bit more of the crazy Cohen. We actually heard a clip from the Mea Culpa podcast that was admitted into evidence, and that was quite a jarring contrast to hear the ranting Cohen on his podcast contrast with the very neutral, even-keeled Cohen that we've been hearing from on the stand. And I think that probably had an effect on the jury. I wasn't in the room, so I'm not sure how they reacted to that. There was also this more subtle point about Cohen's cooperation with law enforcement for a variety of reasons to reduce his sentence, which they've talked about before, to indict Trump, which they talked about before. But there's also this strange subplot that he thought that, that the judge and the prosecutors were in cahoots against him with regard to the tax fraud charges against him. So we can talk about a bit about that. There was this theme that Cohen is constantly leaking things to the press. But I think the biggest the biggest point that Blanche landed was just before lunch. This called into question one specific phone call between that Cohen testified to having with Trump. I believe it was on October 24th, 2016, with via Keith Schiller. So the call logs logged a call, but two calls rather, between Cohen and Schiller. One was very short; it went to voicemail, and then Cohen says that they called back, and Cohen got to speak to Trump for a minute and a half, and this was all about, you know, the Stormy Daniels payment and the resolution of that matter. But we got into a bit which I don't know if Anna or Ben want to take over, but we got into a bit of how this may actually have been about something else, about how, you know, Cohen had been getting these harassing prank calls. This one from a 14-year-old, and Blanche pulled up some texts that seemed to corroborate that this call may not have been about Daniels, but in fact may have been about these prank calls that he was receiving. That was definitely, I think, the glancing blow of the day. I can't really think of any other moments like that. And again, that came right before lunch.
Okay. Anna, well, what was your big picture reaction both to that moment and to the rest of the day? Did Michael Cohen hold up, or is he toast?
No, I think that there were a few punches that were landed, but there were no deadly blows, so to speak. The moment that happened before lunch, I think, they certainly have an argument there that relates to this one phone call with Keith Schiller. And as Tyler explained, Michael Cohen apparently was receiving harassing phone calls from a 14-year-old at the time. And I would just like to say on this podcast, if you are a now 22-year-old who, when you were 14, you were making harassing phone calls to Michael Cohen.
Come on the Lawfare podcast and talk about it. We want to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. You are now at the center of the defense in the former president's criminal case.
And give your exclusive interview to the Lawfare podcast.
Our DMs are open.
We will not compensate you $130,000, but we do promise you a rollicking good conversation. And I think the statute of limitations on your juvenile offense has probably run, although I am not a lawyer and you cannot take legal advice from me.
Right. So, but the whole 14-year-old ordeal, which involved, you know, this evidence of Michael Cohen saying to Keith Schiller, call me. And then, you know, there is a call that lasts for about 2 minutes. And then there's another text message about, you know, to Keith Schiller about whether something about like, did you get any info on him or something to that effect? And so there was this evidence that was presented by the defense suggesting that this phone call to Keith Schiller that Michael Cohen said on direct was a time when he spoke to Donald Trump about the Stormy Daniels payment, was in fact a call about this 14-year-old. That is a call that took place on October 24th. But I think the more important phone call that is corroborating evidence that is in evidence that the prosecution presented is actually a different call that happened on October 26th in the morning. And it was a direct call between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, or one of Trump's at the time phone numbers. And it lasted for, I think, between 5 and 8 minutes. And then it was directly after that, like minutes later, that Michael Cohen starts emailing with the people at First Republic about making sure that all this paperwork is getting through with the Essential Consultants bank account, which of course is the one that Michael Cohen ultimately used to pay Keith Davidson, which was the Stormy Daniels payment. So I think that even though it is a very important point that the defense got to underscore about the nature of memory and kind of, you know, whether Cohen was really certain about when he had these calls, and he, you know, at one point he said something to the effect of, you know, yes, I'm sure that I remember this, but then he kind of backtracked and said, well, it was after I reviewed these documents and records in the case that I, you know, my recollection was refreshed. And that happens all the time. This is a case that is many years old. And so that is the kind of thing that's going to happen. And that's one of the risks that comes with bringing a case that is many years after the fact, is that you will have witnesses whose memories and recollections may be a little bit, different than maybe it would have been if you brought it earlier. But again, I don't think it was, a death blow. After the lunch break, though, we did get into more of the substance of the actual facts of this case. And I think I'm curious to hear Ben and Tyler's reaction to some of that, because some of the things that we got were interesting points that the defense was eliciting testimony about. So, for example, they had Michael Cohen testify that he never had a retainer at the Trump organization, even when he did do legal work. They had him testify that you don't.
And explain why that's important.
Right. So that relates to part of the, basis of the charges, is that these these payments to Cohen and the invoices that he sent, a number of the invoices that form the basis of the charges, he said, pursuant to the retainer agreement, please pay the enclosed amount, the $35,000 amount that Cohen received for a period of several months in 2017. And so that is one of the allegedly false documents that form the basis of the charges.
Well, Anna, can I just ask also, because for you to explain that a bit more, because I feel like some people might hear this and on the surface may think that actually it's strange that Blanche would be eliciting from Cohen that he never had a retainer agreement, because that might on the surface seem actually to work against their case. But
I thought this was a terrible point.
Well, that's what this is why I'm bringing it up, is because I actually want you guys to discuss, like, why would you bring this up? Does it help or hurt? Because I think it could go either way.
So I don't think it can help, actually. So he elicits from Cohen that he doesn't need a retainer agreement because he's an employee, and you don't need a retainer agreement from your employer. You can just work for your employer. That's correct. But starting in 2017, he is no longer an employee. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that when he bills all through 2017, he bills under a retainer agreement, which doesn't exist. When he takes his salary up until 2017, he takes his salary. He's not sending them a fraudulent bill pursuant to our non-existent retainer agreement. Please send me my salary. So I thought that was like an argument that I actually really didn't understand why Blanche was making. He's setting up, I think, on in summation, a kind of closing ridicule of this argument by the prosecution. And I think he either takes the jury for idiots, or he thinks he's putting one over on them. I genuinely don't understand what he was trying to do.
Well, and I also think there's other avenues that he didn't. And again, we might get to this, but I kind of was expecting, because, and this takes a little bit of explaining, but remember the payments in totaled $420,000. A part of that is the direct reimbursement for the $130,000 that Cohen paid to Stormy Daniels. But another part of it is this bonus that Cohen was supposedly receiving for his work for the Trump organization as a salaried employee, in which he was supposed to be doing legal work technically. And so I kind of expected them to be going down this line of questioning in which they're saying a part of this a part of this payment was for your bonus, and your title was, whatever it was, personal counsel. What was the title?
Personal counsel.
Not to the president, but I'm talking about the Trump organization. It was
personal attorney to Donald J. Trump himself.
Special counsel to Donald J. Trump. And your title was this, and that was because you were doing legal work. And so I thought that what the argument could be at the end of the day is that, Well, the bonus, for example, would be for legal expenses because it's a bonus for a salaried legal employee. And that's kind of mixed in with this reimbursement payment. And so then that's why you have it listed as legal expenses or whatever. That still doesn't really quite explain why Michael Cohen said that there was a retainer agreement in the invoices, but you still have like a little bit there to work with, maybe. But he didn't go down that avenue, and instead he did this kind of bizarre, there was no retainer agreement, right? And so but Tyler, did you have a different perspective on that, or
Well, similar. I thought he was going somewhere that he never actually did. So, he might get there on Monday and he might get there in summation. But I thought he was going to do two things. I thought he was going to say, Cohen never had a retainer agreement. That's why we don't actually see like some sort of contract or retainer agreement in document form to corroborate the fact that this was a legal retainer. He didn't get there. I also thought he was going to pursue a line of argument that he never, in 9.5 years, he never had a retainer agreement, even though he did some legal work, not only for Trump, but for some of the children as well, for Melania. And therefore, it's so informal that he maybe, sometimes billed for legal work under a retainer agreement that was like kind of loosey-goosey. He did neither. So I am still questioning why he started down that road in the first place.
Yeah. And then Roger, the other thing that we got in the afternoon that relates to the substance of the case goes to this defense theme of all of this was just business as usual. This is just how things work. Like they elicited testimony from Michael Cohen in which they had him say, well, yeah, NDAs are pretty common. Yeah, I often did speak to the press in the course of my employment for Donald Trump. I had a huge Rolodex of members of the press. And yeah, I didn't speak whenever I was working out all the NDA stuff, which by the way is perfectly legal, blah, blah, blah. All of that was done via email or text message. It wasn't done via Signal, the encrypted messaging app. So there was all this kind of, line of inquiry that was trying to suggest those various defense arguments. So again, I'm curious to hear what Ben and Tyler made of that.
Well, let me ask a related thing. He went off on sort of a weird riff about Maggie Haberman for a while. What was that about? I mean, was this? Yeah, what was that about?
So I mean, I think it was, first of all, it was kind of uncomfortable because Maggie was in the room. Although I was in the overflow room at the time, and so I wasn't in the same room as she was. But it was an extended conversation about how Cohen butters up journalists and uses them to get favorable coverage of himself, and the sort of case study, either because Blanche didn't know that Maggie was sitting in back of him, or because he did know that Maggie was sitting in back of him. I don't honestly know, was Maggie Haberman. And so, he kind of walks Cohen through, having known her for a long time, having been a source of hers for a long time, and having, whispered a bunch of things in her ear at various times, and having kind of asked her to cover things that he was involved in a fashion that was flattering to him. Now, both Blanche and Cohen are, of course, happy to throw Maggie Haberman over the bus. It's completely unclear to me. It's not a fair portrayal of her, of course, because she, has her own side of every one of these interactions, and she's not an unsavvy consumer of who Michael Cohen is. That said, it does describe a fairly deep, long-term reporter-source relationship that, is a feature of the kind of journalism that you do when you're close covering this kind of group of sleazy people, right? You end up in these weird transactional relationships with them.
Just one other, I think, small aspect of that conversation was Blanche, I think, was trying to take the wind out of the sails of the argument that Trump directed every single thing that Cohen did. He was asking about, this usual practice of how Cohen would talk to reporters. Anytime there was that Cohen got wind of a negative story coming down and he was asked for comment, Cohen said he went immediately to Trump's office and co-crafted a statement with Trump every single time. And Blanche really pushed at that. He said, every time, there was never a time where you just went ahead and gave a comment to a reporter without going to Trump first. And Cohen, I thought, was pretty firm. He said, the initial comment, I would always go to Trump. Of course, there were another newspaper, another magazine for the same issue. I would mimic this statement. But, the reason being was fear. He was afraid that Trump would blow up at him. He was afraid that Trump would fire him for some rogue comment, which, after everything we've heard so far, I found fairly compelling. Though it does kind of, I think, strain credulity that he would never, ever talk to a reporter without Trump first.
And that's the thing is, I think this is a pretty honest account of Cohen's self-image, but I'm not sure that it accurately reflects at all his actual behavior, because I do have the feeling that he's somebody who can't resist going on TV and just shooting the shit. And so he, I think he has this idea that every time a story comes up, he consults with the boss and they decide on and he does it every time because he doesn't want to lose his job and he doesn't want, but in fact, somebody calls him up and he'll just shoot his mouth off. And he sort of acknowledges that the campaign staff thought he was a real pain in the ass and didn't like his freelancing, but he says Trump didn't mind it. And so I think he kind of had a like, I don't think he's lying there, although he's clearly lying about some other things, but I do think that he's probably not accurately describing his behavior.
Well, and I also think, though, maybe he's describing what he would do with on the record comments or, on background comments. But I think what you're describing, Ben, is more of, yeah, he seems like the kind of guy who's off the record going to be chatting up reporters about and just kind of gossiping.
So yesterday, I mistakenly, I think, I thought the important thing today would be this, that, he disavows now having one of his guilty pleas. He says he was lying to the judge, the one about federal tax evasion. But it doesn't sound like that was such a big deal, confronting him with that, or am I wrong? Was that?
No, I think this is the part of the cross that was really botched, honestly, by Blanche. First of all, it should have been first. This is a guy with a very long history of lying, and you're trying to establish that you can't trust anything he says. And so what you do is you say, did you lie when you said this? Yes. Did you lie when you said this? Did you lie when you said you were lying about this? Did you lie to the federal judge when you pled guilty for blank? Right. And you do it as a rapid fire set of bullet points. But instead, what Blanche did is first of all, he waits until he's hours into the cross before he gets to it. And remember, the jury's gone home and slept for 2 nights. With 2.5 hours of cross before they get to this. And then when he gets to it, he gets into arguments with the witness about each and every one of these. And so you end up with these long kind of debates about, were you lying to Judge Pauley when you pled guilty to this tax evasion? No, I wasn't really lying. I acknowledge the facts. I just don't think I should have been charged. Yeah, but you said you were lying. Well, I was lying in that I said I was guilty, right? and that you end up with a very complicated adjudication between the witness and the lawyer of what really should be very simple, which is that A, you committed tax evasion, B, you pled guilty to it, C, you said under oath that you were lying when you pled guilty under oath to it, and now you say you weren't lying when you said you were lying when you pled guilty under oath to the tax evasion, right? Like, that should be really simple, and Blanche managed to make it much less simple. And I think, honestly, again, I don't ever want to impute my reactions to the jury, but I was nodding off during that part. And I noticed that some jurors were not, there was some head movement among some jurors too. It was, to make a sequence of lies that long boring takes work.
Well, and also it wasn't just that it was boring. He kept jumping around. It was confusing. He kept jumping around on the timeline. Again, same kind of thing that he was doing on Tuesday. It just really did not have thematic coherence in that first. He really improved. He got into his rhythm in the afternoon, and there was a much more coherent story and themes to what he was doing after the lunch break. But it truly was just a repeat of Tuesday for the first few hours.
I'll also say that I think I was just gonna say, just to add to that, I think Cohen asked Blanche to rephrase the question, or he said he didn't understand the question about 30 plus times, and I don't think that was a tactic to deflect the question or stall or anything. I think he just didn't understand the question because I didn't understand the question.
Speaking of nodding off, there's a question that I have. I hope it's not just me, but Trump does close his eyes, and then people disagree. Does he ever sleep? Is he faking sleep? Is he just concentrating? Each of you have seen him, and I sort of think this matters. This is like, cross-examination of your biggest enemy in the world in a felony case. Does he really sleep at times? I mean, what's happening?
I will say, early on when the sleep allegations were coming out, I think most of the time he's closing his eyes and he's conscious. My guess is that he thinks he's portraying this strength and aloofness by like rising above it, and he's just, I don't even care about this to the extent where I can just kind of close my eyes and meditate or dissociate or something. But I can't remember what day it was, Monday or Tuesday. I'm pretty sure he was asleep 1 or 2 times. But I'm not prepared to say that he was, sleeping all the way back from jury selection. I think it's like he truly thinks he's just like, he's portraying this.
Well, he's
guys,
frozen.
But that's my own speculation.
Yeah, I am in agreement with Tyler. I think most of the time he is definitely not sleeping. I think particularly with Michael Cohen, it's been very pointed that he seems to be keeping his eyes closed the entire time. It's kind of like a hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil kind of move where he just honestly can't even bring himself to have to look at Michael Cohen. I actually, though, too, one of the things is that I have heard, I don't know, because I have never been up directly where the defense table is. The Secret Service would tackle us if we tried to do that. But I have heard that it's actually quite difficult for the defendant in that courtroom to see over to the witness without kind of, having to lean over, that kind of thing. So it may just be he can't see anyway. And so he's just closing his eyes to kind of listen and concentrate.
But he could look at a screen if he wanted.
He could.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a total power move. So he doesn't do it when there's an innocuous witness whom he doesn't care about. But when it's Stormy Daniels, when it was David Pecker, he wasn't doing it. But when it's Stormy Daniels or Michael Cohen, people he really hates, it's a show of, devil may care, I'll sleep through your testimony, you can't harm me kind of thing. But whenever he needs to say something to his lawyers, he leans over and says it. So he's not actually asleep.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time, but Anna, what's left in the trial? What's gonna happen Monday and beyond?
Right. So Blanche estimates that he still has a little bit more cross. He said that he estimated that he would finish by the morning break that usually takes place around 11:15 after the 9:30 start time. So we've got a little bit over an hour, maybe 2 hours left of Blanche's cross-examination, likely on Monday. And then it goes to the defense case, and we still do not know yet who the defense will put on as a witness or witnesses. They had indicated, according to the transcript earlier, that their only potential rebuttal witness may be this expert witness who would testify to some of the campaign finance aspects of the case. Of course, they've also said that there's still no determination on Trump's potential testimony, but I am personally doubtful that that will happen. And oh, sorry, Tyler, did you say something?
No, I coughed. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
right. Okay. And so then today, though, I will note that we had this conference about potential issues related to the campaign finance experts' testimony. The defense had indicated that they may or may not call the expert depending on the judge's ruling about what the expert could testify to. And Judge Merchan already had a ruling in the pretrial motion phase in which he basically said that the expert can't testify to certain opinions of law about what does or does not constitute a campaign finance violation. They were basically trying to get a second bite of the apple here and trying to convince Justice Merchan to expand that prior ruling and allow the expert to testify to a number of things. It sounds to me like Justice Merchan is not going to be willing to do that. He listened to some of the testimony they wanted to elicit and basically said, I'll think about it and I'll look at the record and the minutes here. But, so far right now, nothing's going to change based on my prior order. So we may or may not get an expert testimony on Monday after the cross-examination redirect happens. And then we may or may not get other defense rebuttal witnesses, but it's unclear. Did Ben and Tyler, do you have any other?
We're going to go quickly to summations.
Yeah, and Justice Merchan said, if that's it on Monday and we finish up with redirect, then we're going to go straight into the jury instruction conference and be prepared to do summations on Tuesday. So.
Did you want to say something, Tyler?
No, and the judge also added that he doesn't want any, he's trying to avoid as much as possible any large breaks between summation, jury instructions, and deliberation.
Well, we will leave it there. Anna Bauer, Tyler McBrien, and Ben Wittes, thank you for joining us today. And thank you all for watching. If you want to support Lawfare's coverage of the Trump trials and watch this dispatch without ads next time, become a Lawfare material supporter at lawfaremedia.org/support. See you Monday.